And I'll send you the links so you can share them if you want to before we get going. Oh no! All right, here we go. And I'm just gonna post up on the blue sky that we've got some stuff going on. I sent you over the links also if you want to
Thank you.
share them around.
Lovely. Let me take a picture. Smile for the picture. Cool.
I have glorious curly hair today.
Yeah, true.
All right. So it is our first little launch of our weekend politics show. I am Hunter, better known as Rote, and this is Otilia. She's a fabulous content creator, lobbyist, politico, lady about town, queen of the Brussels world. And today we're going to talk to you a little bit about all of the bonkers things happening at the European Union, everything from news around abortion access and rights to the Hungarian elections and a progressively more absurd and ridiculous international controversy that kicked off yesterday that you guys have to hear about to believe it is even remotely real. So if you would like to take us away, Ms. Otilia, and tell us about what happened with abortion rights and the European Union.
Yeah, no, indeed. Well, thank you, first of all, for the fabulous introduction. I'm glad I'm perceived as so fabulous. And yeah, let's talk a bit about abortion, but maybe just to preface the whole morning discussion with what's going on in the EU and just like everything we're seeing now. I think it's worth saying elections have consequences. And I feel like I always give an anecdote about our elections party with you and you that we had a few summers ago. And the mood was just completely off because it felt like that night everything was going to change and we're going to see the effects in Brussels right away. And we did. Actually, we've been seeing them a bit before, even in the last legislature, how things were shifting, the kind of the legislation that was discussed, But after the new parliament formation, I think it became kind of clear that we've kind of entered an era where things are not going to be as usual. The EU is not going to put out the same type of legislation that we were used to. It's really an EU very much run by the EPP and the ECR, even if, on the face of it, it doesn't seem like it. And if von der Leyen wanted to build the same kind of coalition and like hold on to that, in reality is not the same. And just the how much these parties are able to push certain narratives into the public discourse has just completely shifted what kind of politics we discuss. So I think even like the civil society, the center to left parties, they're all kind of playing a bit not catch up, but they're playing a resistance game really of like trying to block rather than proposing their own agenda. And I think that's why just this is a good segue into what's been going on with My Voice, My Choice, which some of you might know, some people might be new to this. It was a European citizenship initiative. No, citizen initiative, there you go, which is this tool that the Commission offers to citizens. Essentially, you can propose a legislation, and if you can gather 1 million signatures, then you can rightfully ask for the commission to at least react to it. Now, of course, there's criticism with this kind of mechanism because it doesn't necessarily hold the commission accountable to the level that citizens would want to. The commission would need to respond, but it doesn't need to necessarily propose legislation unless it thinks it's useful, you know. And there's always like, it's designed in a way where the commission has a bunch of leeway, right, to do whatever it wants afterwards. But I think the
Step
My
on.
Voice My Choice initiative was it was extremely successful. It surpassed the 1 million signatures. I think it had 1.1 and even more. I think it was close to 1.2. But not only that, but I think what their success is, now I'm speaking in terms of like mobilizing, organizing, galvanizing people around the cause, is that they were not a lukewarm feminist movement that's a bit like, oh, girl power, abortion, but only for, no, they were very intersectional. They were very like outspoken about other topics. They ran petitions on the genocide in Gaza, about conversion therapy as well. They were supporting other initiatives. They've been very, very vocal about other topics in politics, which definitely positioned them to be even more progressive than, oh, we're just about this petition. So they were really like a driving force. You can see that. I think they're very influential in the civil society right now. The movement that they build and the networks that they
The
build
soil around this well
were
feels somewhat damp.
a great success.
The well's
And so
closer to the
naturally, after receiving the million plus signatures, they came to Brussels to do the proper lobbying. So what happens after the 1 million signatures is that you would have the proposal evaluated by the respective committee of the European Parliament. Then it moves to plenary. So the committee votes, then the big plenary votes, and then it goes to the commission. And of course, like I think the Social Economic Committee also voted upon it, and they endorsed it as well. But really, what we saw at the end of February, it was the Commission's final response to the initiative. And so maybe it's better to just say what the initiative wants, because it's like, okay, make abortions safe and accessible. It's a bit like a broad term, but what they want is to be able to have funds dedicated to people who give birth to access safe abortion if their country does not allow it, to like travel as well and get it somewhere else. And you know that this is a problem. Of course, the classic cases are Poland and Malta, which completely, like, besides certain exceptions, like prohibit abortions. But there are also countries where technically abortion is legal, but if you call up a public hospital, they will tell you, oh no, the physician refuses to do it because of his religious beliefs, or they don't give a reason or whatever. So it is very much useful. And the outcome of this was, after a very turbulent couple of weeks before that, because we didn't know with all the commissioners going to give a negative response and so on, the final decision was indeed that funds from cohesion funds, I believe, will be able to be used to serve women who want to access abortion. However, there will not be a new fund created, so there's no extra money. And then there's a whole discussion which we can have about it now. Is this a success? Is this not a success? Different voices have been framing it in different ways. There's been a lot of narratives going around, so maybe that's where we could start. How do you feel about this? Let's see, maybe the microphone.
Yeah, I muted myself because I was typing in the chats.
Yeah.
But no. I think it's like a mixed bag, right? Like, because the big win would have been support for the political action and the legal side plus funding. Right now we got the most of it, but critically, this can't really go anywhere unless there's money behind it, which means it basically kicks back down to member states to just choose to do things, or regional and local governments. And this is something I know from the UK, because this was a similar task in Northern Ireland, where like you couldn't have an abortion there, so people would have to go through a whole rigmarole to get over to England or Wales or somewhere else and go get their abortion done, and then it was like a whole other ordeal. And you can see how we're seeing like a major lurch back against the ability for like women to be able to access reproductive care in the U.S. and other places, that if we don't become very strong and solidifying these rights, even to the point of having like a constitutional level appeal, it will be very, very important. Um, and honestly, like this is like the front line of kind of defending democracy and fighting against fascism, because it is about making women lesser, making pregnant people lesser than men, straight men. And if we aren't willing to go to bat for these very fundamental rights that were won over the last century, we're going to have a very quick backlash, and that's very, very problematic.
Yeah.
And also, I think, like, we've been around in like EU world for a while. So like, as you were saying, there's a lot of, you know, more liberal feminist groups or more conservative feminist groups who kind of don't want to push too hard on making like structural changes to kind of enforce these things, and think, very much it's like, oh, well, if people are good, they'll just do the right thing. And we've learned again and again that it's like, unless there's the force of law and money behind those laws to make it actually happen, then it just won't. It just fundamentally will not occur. And we are just, rolling the dice every time. And we should either have one union where women are equal and have access to reproductive care, or we have nothing really. And we have a bunch of states and squabbling where everyone has different rights and qualities of life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I very much agree. It's a symptom of our politics becoming more and more like pulled to the far right, and it really shows in even the way we deal with this kind of law proposals. So actually, I want to reference to, we have a video. If you scroll down on like the EU Instagram, you'll see it's Benedetta Scuderi, the MEP from SND in the European Parliament, who's saying like, even the word feminism is disappearing from texts adopted in the European Parliament. Why? Because exactly like you said, like there's this women rights groups who, well, or not even just like politicians in general, who will not outright say like, oh, I'm against women, or I want women's life to be miserable or whatever. They will obviously say, yeah, I love women, we want women to be happy, la la la. But when it comes down to like recognizing there's a structural problem, they're like, no, 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 the structure is fine, don't touch the structure, don't say feminism, don't say fight, because it means that we need to kind of like change the system. But the system, we cannot admit that it's broken. So because when you admit that, then you admit capitalism is broken, and so on and so on and so forth. So it opens a Pandora box they don't want to touch. So they prefer to like, do this like surface level feminism and so on. And yeah, I just wanted to discuss a bit about this, like the outcome from the commission, because I saw criticism on the right, which is trying to kind of like discredit all the hard work that the team at My Voice My Choice has done, and the team, and also everyone who has supported and who has talked to their mothers and grandmothers and friends and whatever. This was such a collective movement. They want to discredit that, so they're like, oh well, it was basically rejected because it didn't reach 100% of its potential or whatever. And then there's also like criticism coming from the left saying again and again the commission is not doing enough, which is valid. Also the fact that they're not creating an extra fund for reproductive health will pit maybe interests against each other. Money in health is becoming increasingly scarce, and so there's lots of items on the health agenda. Everyone is pushing for more and more funds in a bag that's consistently shrinking. And obviously reproductive health does not, because of its ideological and because it's a politicized topic, even though it's health, it will struggle to cash on that small bag basically. So I also see that side. But however, I just want to stress that in the environment that we are in right now, like think of, and that's why I think the preamble to this discussion was so important, like think that the EU is becoming far right, and still in this kind of political climate, this team at My Voice My Choice and the whole movement around them managed to push this through, get a positive outcome. And I think it really comes as a breath of fresh air for anyone who has done a tiny bit of activism, has gone out in the streets in the last year and has protested against something. This is like a victory that we needed, and we should not let, let's say, other narratives really like mess up with the empowerment that we can get from it. Of course, there's a long way ahead. Of course, they need to continue, and we need to support them continuing to lobby for more funds. But take it in, because I feel like in human rights, we rarely have the time to just be like, we've done it. at least one fight is over. So let's just take it in, let's relax a bit, gather our forces, not make activists go into burnout. That's also something I'm very passionate about, and then keep fighting,
Yeah,
basically.
and we shouldn't like undersell like it is a very big deal. And because this groundwork has already been laid, that means like the next battle is more about just like the funding aspect as opposed to like getting people on
Yeah,
board with the legal aspect of it.
yeah.
Um, and just to kind of like add on to the preamble, the you know not only did the far right do incredibly better than they've ever done before in the last EU elections back in ye old 2024, um, but it's also that the conservatives, so the European People's Party, the EPP, has realized that they can be in an official coalition that's meant to be the Social Democrats and the Liberals, but in reality, they're in an unofficial coalition with not just the one far right group, but a bunch of far right groups. And we now have three separate far right European political parties and parliamentary groups now. We have the ECR with Giorgia Meloni, we have the Patriots with Viktor Orban, and we have the Sovereigntists, right? Is that their name, or do they have
Uh,
another name now?
yeah.
Yeah, and also that's the other thing, they're changing, like, because they fight with each other because they're catty. They keep splitting up, but basically I had it explained to me like this from an MEP. The EPP comes up with an idea and they're like, we want to do this, and then the Social Democrats and the Liberals are like, that seems like a bad idea, how about we don't do that? And then the EPP is like, well, if you don't do exactly what I want 100%, then I'm gonna go with all the far right people and just get it done anyway. And
Yeah.
then it forces like Social Democrats and liberals to be like, okay, can we just do like 50% of the bad thing? And then the EPP is like, no, I want to do 100% of the bad thing. And that's what happens. And the EPP is it like, I think the thing that's like absolutely bizarre is most people who will watch and listen to this have spent almost their entire life under some form of EPP controlling the entire European Union at the top level. So every idea, every mistake, every fuck up has essentially been them. And not only is it that they're wanting to do like really bad things, they're doing things that in the last commission, which had many of the same commissioners, including the commission president Ursula von der Leyen, they're dismantling their own policies that they pushed forward. Like with just a couple of years ago, stuff that hasn't even gone to affect some of them. They're like, okay, no, let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
And this is very, very dangerous because, you know, while it was not perfect or great before, it was.
Sorry, can we do another mic test? I'm not sure if it's just me or if that also translates. Sorry, can we do another mic test?
Enix on throne count towards
Might be a good time for me to tell a couple of jokes. Might be a good time for me to tell a
Everyone,
couple
stay
of
tuned.
jokes. We're on it.
Can you hear me now?
Positive, yes.
Okay. Yeah, my little thing died on me.
I saw your face realizing, and I was like, ah, okay, we got it.
Kick ass. So, uh, yeah, failures all around. Um,
Well,
but
if only some of this upcoming legislation would fail, I would be very, very happy.
oh, me too, me too. Um, no, no, no. I can't remember what I was saying last. What was the last thing you heard?
I think we were, yeah, just in the way that the EPP and the ECR are basically putting out half of the evil, but actually the whole kind of evil. And yeah,
Yeah,
I think
and it's yeah, it's a big problem, and as you said, like elections matter
mm,
so incredibly. And I think people got lulled into a little sense of false safety because the prior EU elections the Greens did really really well, like things were there was a
yeah.
big push to do like Green Deal stuff and climate stuff, and people kind of just assume the EU is just operating and working on its own in the background, but it's very much not that. It needs to be pushed, it needs lots of pressure on it, it needs people to elect people who are not like the worst human beings alive,
Mhm.
which is there's a number of MEPs that are just like there to make their money and do corruption, like Phidias from Cyprus, um, and also because the elections are really low turnout, it's like you can get all sorts of weirdos to get in there, and also minor parties with extreme politics can get in.
Yeah.
Um, so
No,
yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. And then there was this sort of like association of like the EU with green policies. But if you think about it, and I think it, for me at least, who is younger and has become politically conscious, like not very, very long ago, and so on. Like to me, the EU was always this like this apparatus in Brussels who was like kind of like pulling my country by the sleeve and being like, "Hey, don't you want to do a bit of environmental protection and a bit of like human rights and do." And I didn't realize that this is not the state of the EU by itself. It is the state of who represents the EU for this 5 years. Well, 5 years is a long amount of time. You can graduate and like start your life as an adult and so on, and still be under the same legislature, technically, and you come to age as an adult under this, and you think that the EU is just doing green stuff. No, it's not. It's doing green stuff because the Greens had had a good turnout, because these points in the political agenda, they were strong, and they had a mandate to do that. When new elections come, if a bunch of fascists are being elected, then this is going to be the policy, and they're going to focus on their key like policy topics, and they're going to try to pass their kind of legislation. And unfortunately, this is the reality that we deal with right now, and it's really the consequence of what has been elected.
100%,
So,
100%.
speaking of EPP and their drama, shall we talk a bit of Hungary?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So, Hungary has an election next month on April 12th, and it looks like Viktor Orban is going to lose. He's about 10 or 11% behind in the polls, has been for a very, very, very long time now. To give you some like background on like why Viktor Orban's looking at defeat, About 2 years ago, there was a scandal involving his former justice minister pardoning someone over pedophilia. This was caught on an audio recording by her then husband, but now ex husband, Peter Magyar. He posted it on Maine to his Facebook and I think also his Instagram. It went crazy viral. And after that moment, Victor has not been able to kind of wriggle his way out of nonstop scandal after nonstop scandal. The magic spell was broken. Ironically, a scandal not involving the Epstein files. So for the last like year and a half, he's been a bit of a panic and getting more and more spun out. And now that we're like in the last days of the election, he has for the last few months been trying to create a conspiracy theory involving the country of Ukraine, trying to overthrow the Hungarian elections, and a whole bunch of other stuff. You wanna tell some of the highlights of that?
To me, I mean, what struck me the most is this is their narrative about like Brussels taking us to war and the whole build up around that. Maybe you know more about the Hungarian conspiracy. I was really struck by the AI videos of Brussels will take us to war. Your father will be killed on the front and so on. Like this kind of narrative, which is like it's extremely petty. The despair that must be now present in the Fidesz party, like this to me just shows the levels, you know. And then there's the whole drama with Peter Magyar and how they try to frame him for no idea what consensual activities. Um, Fair enough. The point is, I love seeing the far right parties, especially being scared ahead of the elections and using all of their arsenal, trying to give it all, and they just like it's this aura of patheticism that they just like drown into. But yeah, tell me about this Ukraine stuff. I have not ticked that box.
Okay, so the short version is that Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian secret services are trying to actively manipulate the election to make Viktor Orban lose. Okay, but it's gotten to the point where he's like now created this idea that a pipeline that runs through Ukraine from Russia through Ukraine to Hungary was deliberately destroyed by the Ukrainians, or there's another version he also pushes, which is they have just turned off the pipeline. In reality, the pipeline was blown up several
Yes.
times by the Russian government. And Viktor Orban's big buddy with Vladimir Putin. So he's been going around to European capitals. He was in Slovakia, then he was in the Netherlands, trying to get conservative and far right leaders to just back his conspiracy theory version of events.
Mm.
This came so like at first it was like Fico in Slovakia, who's like his buddy, so like no one really cared about it. And then it was the Prime Minister of the Netherlands the other day being like, maybe we need to have investigations to see what's going on with this pipeline. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, motherfucker, like it was blown up. Like that's what happened with the pipeline. And now, as of yesterday, it got really, really absurd. So there was two armored trucks coming from Ukraine to Austria, transferring money between two state banks, so Austrian State Bank and the Ukrainian one. It had 35 million euros in cash and 9 kilograms of gold. They were stopped by the Hungarian security services. They kidnapped all of the Ukrainian drivers and took all the money. And since yesterday, or maybe like late last night, the day before, no one knows where these guys are. They basically just have them go into Budapest and then they disappear. And that's where they're at. So, like, he decided he was going to take hostages and a bunch of money to prove that Ukraine was manipulating the election. But it gets a bit worse because the day before, he managed to get Putin to send him two Ukrainian POWs that he's also holding captive. So 9 people total, 7 drivers, 2 POWs. And this just continues to escalate. He keeps making like, I believe it was 82 million in total, but I think that's the gold value as well from what I saw. I saw both of these numbers just to come from one of the chat comments. But
But yeah, it's absolutely absurd. Like it's some of the wildest nonsense you've heard. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, what does he think will happen here? Like there's no out that makes sense for him, right? He either backs down or he gets sanctioned by the EU and Ukraine and a bunch of other countries.
Well, I mean, to be honest, he is already sanctioned. A bunch of money is being frozen. I think because originally, not originally, I think what he's trying to do is like he is using this pipeline as like ransom for the 90 billion euro loan that the EU wants to give to Ukraine. And then again, he vetoed it. So first, to me, it sounded like it was like just a power play. He's trying to intimidate Brussels. Brussels has not yet said no, if your pipeline, and then just we will bypass you, because he cannot do that, obviously. Brussels is extremely frustrated with him, and at the same time they kind of have to tell Ukraine nicely, hey, do you want to like repair the pipeline? And then Ukraine is like, well, we're trying, but we're just being a bit slow. I think they're also trying to like buy a bit of time, because why would Ukraine like invest its resources into repairing a pipeline that literally helps their enemy like continue the war and sell gas? And like you mentioned, like it's been blown up many times. It's not like it's a quick easy fix job and like whatever. This is like a major investment, right, to do that while you're at war, and while it could literally be bombed the next day. Like if Russia wants to really play dirty, they will just bomb it the next day after it's being inaugurated, like, you know. But I think this is one of the first time we see Orban really going into desperation mode, because it's one thing to hold this pipeline as like a gambling chip, or like to hold it against Brussels, and it's another thing to go full on. Like, to me this sounds like a Trump technique, where he actually like acts upon his delusions, and then he makes a whole complicated mess that the world now has to deal with. Is basically now the EU has to deal with like hostages and money being stolen and prisoners being were like, so frankly, it's the one of the first times that I see Orban going to this extent, and I have to say it's quite scary.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest fear of this, and I think I've told you this before, but I don't think he's going to want to leave. I think he has enough buddies, especially Donald Trump, who would be willing to back him in any kind of crazy claim he makes. And now that Trump set up this fake UN Board of Peace thing, like the darkest timeline is like they present some fake security decree and they're just like, the elections were manipulated by XYZ, Viktor Orban's the prime minister, he gets to stay. And I mean, and like the scary part is it's like, this seems insane, but it's not a 0% chance of happening. It's not even like a 10% chance of it not happening. Like that's the scary part. And now that we see like the US and Iran, the Maduro stuff, blah blah blah, it's like what level are they willing to go to maintain the far right leaders in Europe, because that is their strategic goal. I mean, it was in the national security strategy. It's like to help defend the patriots in Europe. They have a big conference this weekend in DC. What was it called? It was like the Alliance of Sovereign Nations, which is like a new kind of CPAC group started by Congressman Luna, who's like way out there. Like she's super, super wacky. But like ours there, and Fidesz and all these other groups. Yeah. Like Simeon's like one of the headliners. It's yeah, I know. It's bad times. And
Imagine him as a panelist on something.
God. It's just bad vibes in general. Worst blunt rotation ever. But yeah, I mean, I think we're watching the death throes of a tyrant, and he's just gonna do whatever it is, because like the thing is, like Victor will basically spend the rest of his life in a courtroom because he has done so much corruption, just like buckets of corruption, and that's just the stuff we know about already. So, and then like the following government's going to have all the motivation to want to do that. And it's not just him, it's his kids, it's his family, it's his extended friends. Like it's a huge network. It's not just
the entire hospitality sector in Hungary.
Right. And also it's not just like the Hungarian stuff. He's got his hands and tentacles into stuff all over the Western Balkans. He's like, I mean, he's a part owner in Euronews. I mean, these are wacky things. So it's I totally understand like why Victor's watching his house of cards crumble in on itself, and he's like, What do I have to do to not go to jail? I guess I have to stay prime minister forever. And how do I stay prime minister forever? But also at the same time, like I don't think the Hungarians are going to be down with it. I mean, he doesn't
Yeah.
have the popularity he did. The people who still support him are like very old people in rural regions, and he's lost basically everybody else. The one of the main things about understanding like the 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 backlash out of that pedophilia pardoning scandal is that the guy who broke it, Peter Magyar, forms the his now big opposition party TISA. That was a party split from Fidesz. They lost a significant amount of their key people and resources, and not just that, but like people who know where all the skeletons are buried, know everything that went on in Victor's regime. So it's not just like an opposition party is doing very well. It's that his party imploded on itself, and now he cannot figure out what to do. And that is what makes the likelihood of Magyar winning much higher, but also that is why Victor is in such a weak state, because it's not like Fidesz came together and they're like, no, we got your back. They were, half of them were like, maybe we fucking leave before we go to jail. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It brings me to, because I wanted to discuss a bit about Peter Magyar and like his party and so on, because I remember at some point it was like during a discussion with someone that they were mentioning basically, like to overthrow these autocrats, you would think that you need like the communist revolution to literally go and like impose a completely new system, but most of the times, not or most of sometimes, like let's give the benefit of the doubt, it would actually be the conservatives who would like bring back sort of democracy, or like people who are like like kind of like in this case were like a splinter from the original party. And it seems like in this case it is kind of that, and they do have the advantages of like they were in on the secrets, they know exactly what buttons to push. And also when you have, because in Hungary this is the case, like right, the society itself, like their views that they were also like fed propaganda for the last 11 years. So like of course these are the feelings towards Brussels and towards Ukraine and so on. And you kind of see how like Magyar is not necessarily going like full on, oh my god, I love EU, give me all of the Ukraine. Like definitely the policy will be softened, and maybe Brussels is even waiting for him to win to unlock the loan and everything. But he's not going completely opposite. He's still trying to like appeal to this conservative crowd, because he knows that this is where the vote lies, and the progressives are just going to rally behind him because they also want to see Orban go, and then they will just vote strategically on this one. But yeah, how do you feel about this claim that maybe the job of overthrowing the autocrats is for the, let's say, center right or something, just to open a can of worms.
So I was actually asked this the other day when I was interviewed on an American podcast, and I think the reason Hungary is successful, like able to democratically kind of wiggle its way out of this, is because of party split. Like that is a death blow to most regimes. Like if you lose like a significant chunk of your support, like not just supporters, but like your party apparatchiks and like all the most important people. So I think this is a very good route to get rid of an authoritarian leader. I think it's a very good route to achieve these things. I don't know if it's the only way to do it. I mean, when I was talking with a Hungarian colleague of mine, a year ago or something, their internal debate in their party was, okay, do we run in the next election like it's a normal election and all the parties run candidates and we just try to win and do normal things? Or do we just get rid of the dictator? Like, is that the goal? Is that the much higher priority of what we can do? And then whatever, we'll have another election later and we'll figure it out. Or if Magyar sucks, then will his regime will break like a normal one will, not like 16 years of Victor.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you saw like the last, I don't know, 8 months or so, that's where they kind of aligned. They were like, okay, this is the higher priority right now. Like Victor is critically damaged. Like we might not have this opportunity again. And that is why, you see the vote shift in that way, because it's, I think there are some people who view Magyar as like a messiah kind of figure and a savior of Hungary, but then there's way more pragmatic people who are just like, he's the guy that fucking stabbed Victor and made him bleed, and that's our guy for right now. And I think this is where they're at. The other thing I was really thinking about, and this is also what my friend said, um, Hungarians are not in North Korea. They're not detached from the world. They can go over one country over in every direction and see them improving faster than they are. And this isn't just like a rich country like Austria, but also Slovenia or even like Bulgaria is achieving higher things than they are. And so it's like they understand that Hungary is like being left behind. And they also understand like the main thing keeping money flowing into Hungary is Viktor Orban. And this is a critical problem. And then on like the next level, it's Hungarians are tired of being like the laughing stock of Europe. Like people get really frustrated. And when I make videos about like Hungarian politics, I always have people in the comments being like, we should kick them out of the EU. And that makes me
Yeah.
so angry because I'm like, guys, that would just make it way worse. Like it would just make it all much, much worse. Like the reason Victor can't do like the most extreme things other leaders do is because he's stuck inside the union. And there is like at least some levels of extreme safeguards at the most extreme ends of it. Obviously there's huge amount of wiggle room to do horrible stuff, but like the barriers on the most extreme ends are there still. And is consequences.
No, and this is the reason, why it was so important for countries to join the EU, is because they will be conditioned by stuff. There is this continuous carrot and stick that the EU does that would like kind of like force their governments to not go so much astray because they lose on opportunities. And at the end of the day, it's the values that the EU represents, the money that could be given to civil society to continue the fight against this kind of regimes. If you take them out of the EU, you discredit like all the work that the civil society has done. And I wanted to mention this before, like when you were saying like, oh, maybe he's gonna just like pull a coup and like say, oh, I don't recognize the results and like whatever. I do trust that the mobilization in Hungary will be massive, because this is, I mean, it is a tired civil society. They have been weakened. They are tired. I completely empathize with that, but they're super strong. And if you think about like the Pride March in Budapest and how they managed to like get people from across Europe to come and support them, if something like this would happen, I do see. I hope they do that, and I hope they let's hope it doesn't happen. But if it happens, I hope they are quick to mobilize, quick to call in support, and get people to march and get people to show their discontent with this.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah.
completely. And I think one of the things, we see with a lot of governments in Europe right now is they are hitting up against the wall of some really fundamental parts of like European law and European treaties. And the reason the union was set up in broad strokes, not just as like a peace project or an economic project, but it was also to restrain governments from the most extreme actions they could do because of what happened during the world wars, because of what was possible when there are no limits on government and politicians to fulfill whatever fantasies they want to do. And this means you have way more civil rights, way more freedoms, and way more, liberty, basically. At the end of the day, you can see this in, Georgia Maloney constantly getting hit down by the European Court of Justice again and again and again. Every time she tries to do something like way out there, they're just like, no, this is like bedrock breaking of treaty law. And
Yeah.
if those things didn't exist, we can see how quickly things go off the rails. And this is like part of the project in itself. It's about making sure that governments are restrained. Like they should be able to do profound things and good things, but also if they want to just do, a lot of the stuff around like migration or like detention camps and stuff that like, we have leaders that are being like, we should have our own version of ICE and our own ICE camps and our own stuff. It's like EU law right now, which they're trying to change, unfortunately, prevents that heavily. Like it prevents that from occurring because we decided a while ago, much more wise people, I guess, this was not a good thing that government should do. Like that's like verboten. And that's just the deal. But I mean, I have a lot of hope. I've been really bullish on Victor losing. I felt like it would happen. Like, once I saw it went into like month 4 of that scandal, I was like, okay, he's screwed. Like, there's no coming back from this one. Like, because it's not just like the same people being angry. It's like new people, young people. Like, it's like this is a whole new world of it. And I think it also helps that Orban is seen as the main block, and maybe actually this connects it to like the wider European side of it. Once Magyar formed his party, the European People's Party jumped on it. They were like, okay, you join us and we're going to back you and we're going to put stuff. And basically he got like a very unofficial, just like direct statement that was, if you win, if Victor's gone, the money's released and everything's back to normal. And like, it's all good.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's a lot of Hungarians see that too. They're like, there's billions in euros like that could be in Hungary right now, but they're not because this guy's there. And it's just that. And it's, I think people also don't understand, like, people will get that Victor causes a lot of problems in Europe. But when I say every single person working at one of the European institutions, unless they're in agreement with Victor, has been personally screwed over by Victor screwing up one of their projects, because you will be working on files for years. And then he'll just be like, I don't wanna, at the end, I don't wanna, I don't wanna. And it's mind-bogglingly frustrating. Sometimes it has no benefit at all to Hungary or him personally. He knows this is the game. He's like, I am this disruptor character, and people will give me some concession if I'm horrible. If I'm just absolutely throwing a tantrum, I can get what I want. And unfortunately, he's been able to very successfully accrue a lot of international leaders around him, and he is very much at the center of a lot of the European far right project, and bringing conservatives into his like Viktor Orban nationalist way of running the world. In many ways, Viktor Orban was the blueprint for stuff like Trumpism, but also like people like Bukele and El Salvador. Like, they just have figured out how to do it much faster. And that's because Victor laid out the groundwork. He was like, this is how you dismantle a democracy, but also keep the aesthetic of it still being a democracy. And thankfully, even one of the problems, I guess, for a dictator of an electoral authoritarian system is you still do have elections. So if you do get unpopular, like to the extent he has, you will lose, and that is like one of the few bright spots in this, right?
Yeah, definitely. But also, like, this game that he plays, I think this is the whole narrative that he wants to present. Like, every time he goes to Brussels looking for some sort of like concession from Brussels, it's not necessarily about what he's getting. It's more about like building this narrative of like, I'm not letting Brussels rule my country, therefore I'm the sovereign over my own country. It's not even about what he's getting. It's just that he needs to be the contrarian to play on this narrative. And that's why he was also trying to frame a bit like Peter as like, oh, you're the Brussels dog and whatever. And this led a bit to like some conflicts between Magyar and the EPP. But I don't think that's something very like serious to watch. I think it's just him, like, just before elections, trying to like manage a bit his image, I guess. He also needs to maintain the polls as high as they are. He needs to like be super consistent, and this fear of like not peaking too early. He needs to stay up in the polls, and hopefully we'll manage.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I maybe one last thing on this. For people to understand, the main difference between Viktor Orban and the political parties around him and Giorgia Meloni is they have two different views on the European Union. Viktor's goal of the European Union is he is fine with it either pursuing the policies he wants to do bad things or to destroy it completely. Like, he's fine with both of those outcomes. And Meloni is under the idea that if she gets enough control of the EU, it can be just hers. And so like that is like the main split between those two. They both want to do similar things. It's just their relationships to Brussels is slightly different to one another. And this creates a false illusion that Meloni's like more moderate or good to work with because she's willing to do stuff with Brussels, but it's because she thinks that gives her a bigger, longer term strategic advantage. Like, it's much better if she can have all 27 member states go along her ideological line than to not be able to do that, or only be able to do it bilaterally. And Victor, he has a very different view of this. He's like, if there is going to be some sort of union of states, it'll be one run by me and one that I create, and that the EU is just this horrible like woke blah blah blah, like all the things.
Maybe he's a bit more traditional, I feel like, even in this kind of stance, because I always say like these the leaders of yesterday, the far right leaders of yesterday, just wanted out. They were like, nah, I don't like to play this game. I'm taking my toys and I'm going back home. Bye. And they wanted to just like leave the EU. To me, it's even more dangerous. The game that Meloni plays is even more dangerous because she's putting her people in structures of the EU. And let's not pretend that people sitting in the commission are like, I mean, they're supposed to represent Europe and whatever, but like the legislation they're proposing, even the people who are writing the technical part of it. I mean, it fits a political agenda. It fits what the commissioners want. It fits what the council wants, which is the leaders. Like, we're instilling this kind of policies in the deep layers of the EU, and this is what the EU is going to produce. So having a chokehold on the EU, and also European unity, very important in times like this when you have Trump on one side, Putin on the other side, and so on. But European unity could be also dangerous if we get a very strong Europe led by a bunch of far right guys. Well, that's a very strong empire, basically. And it's gonna just go on like strengthening Frontex, putting a bunch of people in danger, basically like implementing all the seemingly 30s style policies we don't want. So it's something that honestly, personally, I feel very like conflicted by, because this idea of a strong Europe, especially with EU and you, we've been always like advocating about that. But then when you see who's in charge of this very strong Europe, you're like, actually, I don't mind if it's a bit weaker. Honestly, if you're gonna do bad stuff, you know.
I know. It makes you feel really weird because both of you are like, you and I are very pro Europe. We're both like in that Euro federalist like way of thinking, and but also, yeah, I mean, you see the danger in front of you. Like, if you build this machine and someone bad is able to use it, it could be really, really bad. And I think like that's another thing to think about. It's like, yeah, these commissioners are usually, even in news discourse and analysis, are talked about as like bureaucrats, and I'm like, they're politicians. Like the top tippy tops of these things are politicians. They come from political parties, they come from party groups, they come from European parties, and some like during the last elections, people be like, Ursula's not that bad, and I'm like, but it's not just about her. It's also about like Manfred Weber, the leader of the EPP, and he is like the arch Bavarian conservative who started that year in 2024 being like, we should build a wall around the whole of Europe. Like, that was his pitch, which is like, A, insane because there's a lot of water around this continent, but B, it's like they are, it doesn't matter who's the commissioner. It's also like who also is behind them and how much power do they hold, and are they willing to basically say no to their own ideological family? And most of them are not. They're there because of that group of people.
Absolutely.
And if Ursula wasn't willing to play ball with the most conservative people in the CDU, CSU, then she would not be there. And now that you have like Metz, who's like really right wing, and Manfred, and now she's basically decided like, yeah, I'm just going to go along with whatever
I
the
think
guys
she,
want.
I think she's just revealing her cards. These are her cards, and they were all along. And people, when they say, "Oh, no, she's not too bad," no, she's an extremely good politician. This woman is media trained to levels that I don't dream to media train someone in my life. Exceptional public speaker, exceptional in PR. She can have a month of flops, supporting the far right. She will show up, she will deliver a speech, she'll deliver the State of the Union, and you're left like, ah, mommy, nice, that was a good one. I guess I kind of forgive you. And this is why she makes an exceptional president of the commission for her party, obviously.
Yep. I mean, this is how you're able to fail up in European politics. And I mean, the whole time I was always just like, it's so absurd that the worst ever defense minister in German history became the most important person on the continent. It's very absurd. Which brings me to another absurd national leader who has just called an election. So Denmark is going to be having elections in a month or so. And so Mette Frederiksen, who leads the Social Democrats there, is basically the right-wing Social Democrat that everyone who's like on the remote liberal or left looks to, and they're like, well, maybe I can just do what she does and be mean to migrants and Muslims, and that will make me popular. In a reality check, it did not make her popular. Her polling numbers were quite bad until very recently because Donald Trump was talking about Greenland. And now that her polling has gotten back up to around 22%, and keep in mind there's a lot of parties in Denmark. She was like, okay, let's call an election now, even though she could have waited till like the end of the year to do this.
Mhm.
And she's gambling that during her little, patriotic boost in popularity and her anti-Trump statements, that she's going to be able to slide back in. Just a few months ago, they had local elections in Denmark, and her party did not do very well. They lost the capital, Copenhagen, for the first time in their party's existence, and they had held it for over 100 years. And she has a bunch of challenger parties and splitter parties that have broken off. The main thing that I have ill feelings towards is that she's been pursuing something called the ghetto law. So,
Mhm.
the ghetto law is a policy that if a place, like a city district of social housing, has more than 40% of non Danish, non Western people living there, and that means you have to have both of your parents to be Danish, so like white Danish people. Not doesn't count if you have one. You can be a Danish citizen, by the way. Your place will be considered a ghetto. And then after 5 years, if it does not have less foreign people living there, it is considered a hard ghetto. And during those two periods of time, they increase by multiples the what criminal charges you face. So if you had a fine for putting your garbage out on the wrong day, it will be times multiplied because they have decided that now it is too crime of an area. Uh, this Once you have hit this 5 year mark, the government is allowed to demolish the social housing. So demolish buildings, and they've been demolishing buildings and then, of course, selling them off to private developers. So the Social Democratic Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen of Denmark has a policy that is designed to destroy social housing and sell it off to private real estate developers.
It's a very bad sign when Manfred Weber takes the podium and say, "Yeah, we like Mete." If this is the guy that congratulates you on your policies, you've done bad. Honestly, as a social democrat, that's the moment where you take your little bag and you go and you run because
Yep.
it's over. No, but Denmark, I have no idea how this prime minister can be like, oh my god, let's tax the rich on one side, and on the other side they can be like, oh yeah, let's make a ghetto law. Or like, do you remember, I think this was back in the day when they were trying to like depossess like migrants of their belongings. Like, let's say you have like a gold necklace that, I don't know, you kept on you on your horrible journey or like whatever. And they're like, nah, we get that. Because it's like, I don't know, like tax for being here. Like, we're going to use that to feed you. You're not going to feed me.
I know.
Yeah.
It also, like, you start once you start thinking about like these kind of bizarre ideas of like taking people's valuables away. It's like, what are you going to like some sort of gold sales guy and trying to trade? Like, what are we doing here? Because it's not like the government considers that cash.
Yeah, yeah, I'm just
Um,
gonna auction it and use that money to, I don't know, like pay for like whatever they're offering. And yeah,
yeah. and
if they
and just the other day, the Home Secretary for the UK was out there in Denmark at one of the detention centers, dressed in full SS cosplay. And let me try and pull this up because you need to see this.
no,
Um,
no.
mm,
Um, it's ridiculously disturbing. But I'm also thinking, like, in her mind, I think in her mind, she thinks that she plays a very good card, because on one side you have all these like very popular social policies that are very like close to the working and middle class, and like just supporting all the families in Denmark, la la la, like just you know um, in their day-to-day life. So you're not deeply unpopular like Orban, who has this far right side, but then he also wants to make the rich richer, and he's not really taking care of like the health educational system and so on. Like, at least in Denmark this is covered, so you keep the normal families and voters kind of like muffled, like, hey, look, you have all you need, you have a good healthcare system, you have good education, and shut up basically, and let me be horrible to everyone who's not white basically.
yeah.
So in that way, I think this could have been maintained, but clearly, like, I think also this strategy has come to an end.
I mean, it also just didn't objectively didn't work. Like the
Mhm.
can you see this photo?
Let's see. For now, I don't see anything.
Hold on. I think I'm gonna have to send it to you. But
Okay.
I think they can see it on stream.
Okay, great.
One moment. I'll send it to you on chat. Okay. So yeah, I know.
Oh
Yikes.
no, no,
Not
no, no,
great.
no, 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 no. Oh, honey.
Yes, she's there in front of. I know. Very Hugo Boss chic.
Oh la la.
Right. Right. It's crazy. It's
The socks,
crazy.
though. The socks. I'm sorry.
I know. I know. The whole thing is just it's madness. Um yeah. So that's the whole
The
thing.
overpriced vintage shop that she bought that from.
Oh my
We
god, she
made
must
back.
feel great. And like the wild thing is like just a couple of months ago she was over with Kirsty Nome in the US being like, I've been inspired by your policies, and I'm like, which ones? The ones that shot people? Like, what are we doing here? So yeah, she's decided that they want to make it so basically asylum seekers can never get regular residency in the UK. She's increased it to 20 years from 5. After already increasing it to 10, she's done a bunch of other sketchy things. And now her most recent thing that she pitched 2 days ago was that they're going to offer up to £40,000 for asylum seekers to leave the UK. And about 16 years ago, this was literally the policy of the British National Party, or like one of our first modern fascist party in the UK. So it's absolutely wild. Um, yeah, and it's just like and what's also like kind of wild about this is, like I was saying earlier with like the court battles, Mita has been in the European Court of Justice again and again and again, and the prior government in Denmark for these policies, and the courts are just like, this is discriminatory. Oh, and just one caveat I realized I forgot to mention. So you know how I said non-Western in the social housing thing? Okay,
Yeah.
non-Western does not even count all European countries. It just counts countries in the EU, plus the UK, and a couple other countries around the world. So Ukraine, non-Western. Moldova, non-Western.
It's because they cannot handle our Slavicness. They don't like our music, so they just
Yeah.
no. But this is absolutely horrible, and yeah. No, I mean, look, I hate to make it. I hate to make it about Eastern Europe, but there. I mean, look, we've seen the marches against like the Polish and Romanian and all of that, and then you realize, oh, you hate these people, where you get no truck drivers now. Like, see,
I
at
know.
the end of the day, I hate to make it about this. I do feel the East-West divide, and still how even like us from like Eastern Europe, you go in the West for job, study, whatever. You don't feel like an expat. You feel like a migrant. You know what I mean? Like it's still that kind of. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be too insistent with this, just because like there's the white privilege. So at the end of the day, like you'd pass by on the street, and there's not a second look or something like that. Like it's But then you get policies like this, which I'm like, taking hell,
Yeah.
not my got it.
No, no,
Fine.
no. And
So
that's
being Christian is no longer enough. Damn.
yeah, and it's quite it's honestly just like it shows how absurd the policy is, but also just that it's just like based upon the most like far right understanding of all
Yeah,
of these things. They're just like, oh yeah, what's our immigration policy? What the podcast bros are doing. Like that's where we're at. And
literally,
yeah,
literally. And this is also going to, I think maybe it's a good segue to talk about this, because the deportation regulation is being, so it goes in the committee next Monday to be voted in the Libe committee in the parliament. And this
and can you
regulation,
explain this committee?
yes. Okay, so parliament works like that. The plenary, which is in Strasbourg, and you see it, the iconic shots and everything. But when legislation goes into the parliament, first it goes into the committee. There are, I should know the number, but I don't, an amount of committees covering different, maybe you can help me out with the number, covering different legislative areas. So you'd have one for women's rights, one for internal affairs, you have one for like trade and so on, and then you have like delegation with different states. So it's really like they're sharing the files between them. When MEPs go in the parliament,
There are
I think it's
22
basically
committees, so you know.
22 committees. basically based on the party quotas of representation, they get to join committees, and then basically every MEP with their team is kind of like choosing which committees they want to go. They kind of like have to negotiate between them who's going to represent them in which committees and so on, and then they can become chairs and vice chairs of those committees, which means that they chair the meetings. And yeah, you can see normally, if you're familiar with the European Parliament website, you would go, you look up an MEP, someone from your area, from your country, and you can see which committees they're part on. And so that's useful information for you to know. Like if you want something to happen at the EU level, if you want to email someone like an MEP to ask them to take action on something, don't just look up MEPs from your country, but also look up in which committees they're part of, because you might ask one MEP to do something on a policy file that they don't really have that much control on. Yeah, they will vote in the plenary in the last final stage, but that's a bit too late to actually change the outcome. You need to target the MEPs that represent you in the specific committees you're interested in. And the names are pretty self-explanatory. They all have funny little acronyms of 4 letters. So feel free to go on the European Parliament website and explore like how these topics are being divided. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And most of the work also happens in these committees, right? So like once it gets to the plenary, that's almost at the end of the process. So if you want something to happen, you need to get in at that committee level. And because it's like a small group of people, you can really put a lot of pressure on them. And not that many people contact their MEPs in general. So like a couple hundred phone calls can really shift a person's opinion.
Definitely. Or just like even almost like a copy paste letter. The point with these letters is not necessarily what the content of the letter is and how you wrote it personally and so on. No, it's the amount of emails that they get copy paste the letter. If there's a ton of emails going in their inbox, the MEP will know, hey, people are pissed about this. Like, I really have to reconsider what I'm doing, So I think that's a strategy a bit behind it. And for what we're going to discuss now, actually, so we have a list of MEPs you can tag. We have a petition you can sign in their inbox. And I believe the MEP will know. So I'll disclose who this is, but it's the youth branch of the Greens, right? So they have put together like a website where you can literally copy paste a letter so that you don't have to write it yourself. Makes it easier for people to send it. So and all of that, like if you go to the UNU Instagram, we've put everything, just posted about it, and it's recently there. Shameful plug. But yeah, so shameful plug. This deportation regulation, it's called the returns regulation technically, but it's deportation. It's basically saying like, oh, mom, I want ice, and mom says, no, we have ice at home. It's literally bringing ice at home.
Jesus Christ.
I never had an appropriate moment to make this joke, and I wanted to do it so bad.
Oh god, that was a good one.
No, okay. Honey, we have ice at home. We're making our own ice. It's the European ice. From the beautiful springs in Spa, Belgium. We're bringing all the ice from there. But essentially what it's like 4 steps to the whole maneuver, basically. And that's what I also explained in the video. So step number 1, you make everyone that you find suspicious, like basically you criminalize everyone who you find illegal. What do you find illegal? Mostly it's a racial profiling, let's be honest. But you can be illegal if you're missing a document, because God knows what happens to it. You can be considered illegal if you don't have a local residence. Many people on the move suffer from homelessness. Or you can be illegal if you don't have your visa anymore, or you don't have a job or stuff like that, which could literally be your friend who graduated and has not gotten a job because the job market is how it is. So the conditions are like very thin and very common for people who might not, they're not here in Europe for whatever reason that the conservatives would find unacceptable. They're just in a position where they're illegalized, basically. That's number 1. Then you basically deport everyone to countries that they have no connection to. The parliament has already agreed with the council on this list of like third countries that are considered safe, which are, I'll let you see the list and judge if you think they are safe. But most of the times, like these people that are about to be sent there, they have not passed that country, they have no connection to that country, they're just going to be like sent off. They're like, okay, whoosh, we don't want you in Europe. That's number two. Number three is like they would empower the member states to go and look for these people. And this is where the ICE stuff really kicks in, because this includes like home raids or raids at work, no warrant needed. And then they could literally also separate families, take your family with you. Voila. And the fourth is basically making everyone who stands in support or in solidarity with these people illegal. So if you're helping someone hide, if you're helping shelter someone, whatever, even as far as like just like offering them like some legal support or whatever, criminalized. So no solidarity also with anyone who would like to help. And we're talking about coworkers, we're talking about neighbors, we're talking about like people we've been knowing for like years now, and they're part of our communities, who could be like plucked away ICE raid style in Europe. And yet the council, so the commission proposed this. Speaking of like what we said at the beginning of the show, right? Elections have consequences. The commission from 4 years ago would have never proposed something to this amount. Not to say that the migration directive that we had before was any sort of good. It was a shitty policy nonetheless, but it was not to this extent, right? The commission of 4 years ago, I don't think would have proposed something to this level, but now they have the legitimacy to do so because it's being supported. And then the leaders met in the European Council, and they're rejoiced by all of these new tools they will have at the disposal to basically like pluck out individuals that they consider illegal from Europe. This is chilling. And now, because the commission is in agreement with the council, it's up to the parliament to adopt a position that could, I think we cannot stop this legislation. I'm sorry to be a bit pessimistic, but what we can do is like weaken it. So it's very important now that the position adopted by the parliament, either like they just block it or they dilute the hell out of it. And that would be an outcome that still would not be this. But yeah, we're about to have ICE. We're about to have ICE in Europe, guys.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And the scary part is it's like a lot of member states are already trying to pursue this on a national level.
Yeah.
So it's not just on the EU level that you have to think about this, because these things happen concurrently. And as you alluded to earlier, like we had this migration directive, what, 2 years ago now? I don't know, a little while ago.
No, it expired last year or something like that. Yeah.
And this, like the big scary controversial thing in that one was it effectively legalized external detention centers. So third country detention centers outside of the EU. And this has been something like people like Maloney have been pushing for really hard, and Mette Frederiksen and a bunch of other characters. But critically, it is against the European Convention on Human Rights. And so they're basically facing huge legal hurdles to make it the new law legal. And this is also why you hear a lot of European leaders who are very hard and anti-migration wanting to get rid of the human rights laws. And you need to understand these human rights laws are very strong. They're very broad because they want them to be very strong and very broad so that governments can't, bend them in twisted ways to do the stuff they want to do. This doesn't mean you can't deport people or you can't have migration controls. We've known for many decades this is possible under existing EU law, but they want to have more and more extreme powers. They see the things that the US is doing and they're like, why can't I do that? And this is very, very dangerous because you saw it was just a matter of weeks before it went from the worst of the worst to 3-year-olds in bunny hats. Like it's like that's how quick things move. And once you start kind of opening these doors to more and more extreme actions, or you wipe out all of the safety barriers kind of like preventing things from happening, then the national governments, they will go wild because they feel like they can just do whatever they want and there's no one telling them no. And the scary part is that a lot of politicians from the center right, the center left, the liberals, they've been tricked into thinking that if they just go at migration and deportations harder than the far right, that somehow this will get them votes. Somehow it'll make them popular. Somehow they'll get far right voters to vote for them. Not understanding that by agreeing and legitimizing all of these positions, they've now just continuously say, oh, the far right was right about everything. We were wrong about everything. And you just continuously say that over and over by embracing these policies. And of course, if you continue telling people in your country the other guy was right, they're going to think the other guy was right and thus support the other guy because you are basically saying, I was wrong. I had to adopt someone else's ideas. And this is not good in a political sense. You need to be presenting your own positions and your own ideas and your own framings, or else you just end up empowering someone else who has that idea already, who is considered more legitimate for that idea. It's I describe this as the Coke Diet Coke problem. Like if someone wants a Coke, a Diet Coke's not going to do, and it won't matter. So you can be the best Diet Coke ever, but you're still not a Coke.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I was gonna say, who would want far right light? But yeah, exactly. No, you're making a very good point. But yeah, so the basically my call to action for this would just be to engage in whichever way you can. Again, if you go to our Instagram, there's we put a bunch of stuff that we also collected from. To be completely honest, like we also collected from NGOs who are doing God's work on this topic. So yeah.
And also lobby your national governments to put further safeguards in, because that's like the other part of it. It's like if things go through, it's better that there's national governments having laws that creates a tension with the EU and it drags out the political battle longer. Like this is, one of the weirdness of the union is that while EU law is supreme, there are many member states that have laws that conflict, and they will spend years battling out in the courts trying to come up with like a middle ground solution between the institutions and then the member states. But, and so like this is one of the critical times that you need to have this done, because if none of that exists, then things just click into place, and that's very, very dangerous. And maybe your current government will be fine and not do the most extreme thing, or maybe they don't use these new powers, but someone will eventually. Like someone will come along. One of my friends who does politics in Brazil was saying like their big fear is that they realize like between now and forever they're going to have to win every single election, or else Bolsonaro will come back and get pardoned, and this will be terrible. And he's like, and they were like just very honest. They're like, the idea of one party winning forever is impossible. So it's like you can't build a future or a system that it depends on one group of politicians staying in power perpetually, because you'll lose at some point, or you'll have a shitty leader at some point and people get angry. So you this is why we have these these rules, these treaties, these laws, these things in place to prevent government switching not resulting in the most extreme things taking place in a very short amount of time.
But I think it's important to note, like for this migration policy specifically, it's very important. Before we had a migration like directive, and now this is a regulation. Bit of description of Brussels slang. Directive means I'm explaining it right in very colloquial terms. Directive means that the Commission is saying, ideally, this is how things should be done. This is the outcome we would want, and every country is like, okay, implement something that would give you this outcome. Regulation means no, you take this law, implement it. So that's the difference. And that's why if you hear a bunch of the speech around this returns regulation, it's almost like they're celebrating finally having a cohesive policy on migration for Europe. Finally all the member states are aligned. They're technically aligned in crime. So this is the issue. Like, it's a European cohesion. Again, to the discourse that we had before, it's like stronger Europe. Yeah, for bad stuff. Good. No. So this is, I think this is that's why it's even more popular, because whatever the member states are doing now, this will just come on top, and this will be the law that's being applied, basically.
It's a very dangerous thing. And the things that frustrates you is that we know where that leads already. So it's like there's no fantasy. It's not a theoretical of how it goes down. It's like we have it from our own European history how this will go down. We have it from the American example on TV every day.
Yeah. The impact assessment is being done live. Just open TikTok. You want an impact assessment of this law? Open TikTok.
I mean, the wild part about it is like, the mass deportations was Trump's like biggest policy and the thing he was most popular with his people at the beginning. And even his own people think it's not a good idea anymore. So it's like, if they're gambling that this is some like magical tool to stay in power forever or become more popular, whether it's the far right, the right, whatever, it's like the people who are on board with this that's just not true. It's just not true. Once people see people getting dragged out in the streets, they're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
that's not okay. Like this is bad. And
Yeah.
because it is literally like making society into this hostile place where you have to be constantly like looking behind your back, or maybe your friend gets disappeared. And we already have problems with like racial profiling and all these other things in Europe. It's like citizens will be picked up, people will be put into camps that shouldn't be there in the first place. Not that anyone should, but like this is how quickly that creep happens.
Hmm.
um yeah, and it's very, very scary times in Europe.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Where else do we have scary times?
Well, of course, the may you not live in interesting times is like the most important thing ever. So are there any fun last things you want to get to before we settle up?
um, well,
Or are you doing anything
let's go.
exciting at EU&U?
Um, we are finalizing recruitment, so we're gonna have a few new people joining ENU and maybe a few new faces you're gonna see on our profile. So that's very exciting. And maybe this is like a bit of an in, but we had so many like amazing interviews in the past week, and I got so inspired. I'm very flattered by everyone who is applying to volunteer with us. We're an entirely volunteer team. So it's super cool when I have like inspiring people wanting to join us, and I actually get to learn a lot and be super energized by these interviews. And it's not like a, well, what can you offer sort of a deal. So yeah, I'm very excited for that. And well, we'll keep you posted with what's going on next. Any other announcements? Are you planning something in the near future, or any topics we should look
Oh,
out
I
for?
have so much stuff going on. So through like my party work stuff, we're doing with Democrats Abroad, we're doing a big civics week next week. So I'll be doing 5 lives in a row, day after day, Monday through Friday. We're going to be covering the U.S. Constitution and a few other topics. It'll be good fun. And I am just like crazy busy on so many other projects. Been working on my democracy conference. Been working on setting up an NGO right now. So it's just like busy times all around.
Lovely.
And I'm forcing myself to get more on doing lives now, because I like that's where the audience is, that's where people are, and I need to get over myself and just do it more. But I think this is, it's important to make sure that we're creating more communication. You and I were talking that there's not a really a progressive European Union podcast out there that like gives stuff. There's like a lot of centrist analysis, a lot of conservative analysis, but like otherwise it just doesn't exist. And I know it's like a niche of a niche to be into like EU topics, but it is so damn important, so important. And
Hmm.
people really need to understand like what happens at the highest level of government on this continent matters, and it has profound effects on your daily life. And if the European Union is not working, the Europe as a whole gets taken advantage of by great powers around the world. And we've seen that, whether it's, the Trump tariffs, which were thrown on the EU, and then our EU Commission decided to bow to Trump and just accept them. And which is even more absurd now that they were declared illegal. Like it made it like real great stuff right there. But it's like if people are not paying attention, and if you're not demanding that your media and your news are covering this stuff, it goes uncovered, and then corruption occurs, then bad things happen, then the first time you learn about some scandal is way after the fact it's happened. And this is, our future depends on what happens
Yeah,
in, Brussels, in Strasbourg, and all the other places that hold one of the EU institutions. And if we want to be, a strong Europe, but in a good way, we need to be making sure that we're providing oversight, and we're providing influence and pressure to make sure those things happen. Because nothing happens by itself. The world is not a clock. History doesn't just tick forward. It is chosen the direction of every step along the way. So, yeah.
definitely. Oh, very inspirational speech.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, I want to second that. We need to get people activated and active in general in politics, to take action, even as little as they can do. Maybe you think, oh, I'm not in Brussels to influence all this, or I'm not a lobbyist myself, or like whatever. It's not about that. If there's something you can do remotely, if there's something you can do in your community, let's go, let's do it. It's not going to be, if you deeply care about what's going on in the future, and I believe that our generation should even more, just because we have so many years to live under these laws. So it's really up to us to shape them. um you gotta stop being lazy about it and start getting engaged. And it's going to be, and the hard truth is there's going to be some shitty years to come. It's not going to be easy. We will need to take breaks. You have to allow yourself breaks, but you need to come back and show up and do stuff with us, because it's we're fighting for you, but everyone's exhausted. Everyone needs each other's support. We need we need the lines to be wide,
Yeah. Lots of redundancy and lots of people to pick up the flag once someone else needs to rest. I mean, it's super
Absolutely.
vital, and the more people who get into it, the more people who understand what's going on, the easier it is for everybody, and the faster things will change in a better way.
Yeah.
Like if we want things to stop sucking, we need to make them not suck anymore. I can't depend upon leaders, and leaders will not do things unless they're pushed and forced. And if they're still not doing any things, we need to replace them, which means you have to be active, you need to be campaigning, you need to be running for office on the lowest level and all the way at the top. So yeah. All right. So I think that was a great first little episode for us doing
Definitely.
our show. And we will be back again next week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And
All right. So tune in.
and have a lovely week. And hopefully the world is a little less chaotic this week. And thank you so much, Otilia, for being here. I will
Thank you
thank
for having me.
myself. And you
No,
all
thanks for hosting